Hey everyone, and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. I'm Justin. I'm a scientist with the Oceanographic Institute, and I'm part of their underwater philosophy division.
There it is. I'm Nico, and I am the holy diver who's been down too long in the midnight sea.
Oh, I like that. That's
Oof,
going.
oof, oof,
Yeah.
oof.
I'm Dan, and I am reprising my role as a member of the Underwater Squad.
Squat!
Ah! All right, and we are here today to talk about the legendary Jaws. Directed by Steven Spielberg, it stars Roy Scheider as Chief Martin Brody, Richard Dreyfuss as Matt Hooper, Robert Shaw as Quint, and Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody. So we begin with the chief of police, Martin Brody, on Amity Island as he investigates the remains of a teenage girl who was washed up on shore. The local coroner tells Brody that the girl's death was the result of a shark attack, which the audience actually gets to see at the start of the film. Brody decides to then close the beaches. Now, this actually greatly displeases the mayor, and alongside the coroner, they convince Brody that the girl actually died from a boating accident and that the beaches are safe, there is no shark. You see, Amity Island is a tourist attraction, and they desperately need the money that comes from summer visitors, particularly the ones that come for the 4th of July, which is only a few days away. So, how does this go, Dan? What happens?
So, as 4th of July comes closer, the beaches begin to fill up and a crowd enters the water. Unfortunately, the shark attacks again, this time killing a young boy in front of the entire crowd. The boy's mother places a bounty on the shark, and amateur shark hunters from all over the island begin trying to hunt the beast. Quint, a grizzled shark hunter, offers to catch the shark, but he is not taken very seriously. Brody calls Hooper, a shark expert from the mainland, to come assist. Hooper examines the remains of the girl who washed up on the beach and concludes that a very large shark killed her.
Okay. And while they were doing that, Nico, did the local shark hunters have any luck?
Yes and no. So, the local fishermen do catch a shark, and it's a sizable tiger shark, and everyone believes that they've caught the killer shark. Unfortunately, there's like an hour and a half left in the movie, and the actors don't realize that because they're characters in the film. But Hooper is unconvinced. And after he and Brody examine the shark's stomach and find that there's no, human parts, they find that it is actually a different shark that's been killing the people of Amity Island. So they go out on a boat to try and track it down, and they find a wrecked boat with a dead body inside. Hooper then pulls a tooth from the boat and determines that it came from a great white, and that shark is the monster that's been killing the people on Amity Island.
Well, some bad news for you, my good sir. Unfortunately, the mayor doesn't believe that there is a great white shark in the water surrounding Amity Island. He refuses to close the beaches, and he tells Brody to basically do whatever you feel that you need to do to ensure that the beaches are safe. Despite this, the shark still manages to make its way into a local estuary where Brody's son is playing in a boat. His son manages to escape, but Brody does convince the mayor, who's kind of, feeling super guilty at this point, to hire Quint to kill the shark. So they've hired Quint. Nico, take us away.
So we've got our triumvirate of water terror. We've got our Sharky boys, Quint, Brody, and Hooper, as we head out on Quint's boat to hunt and kill the shark. Quint and Hooper, they don't get along. They're kind of foils for each other in terms of their character development, which we're going to talk about. And Quint sees Hooper as this arrogant, young city boy who doesn't know what he's getting himself into. And Hooper sees Quint as this antiquated old sea dog, almost like a caricature of himself. And Brody is afraid of the water and doesn't know how to do anything on the ship. So, despite this, the three begin to bond and establish a sense of camaraderie amongst the three of them. They have several encounters with the shark at this point, and each time they do a little bit more damage to it, but they actually do manage to attach a few buoyant barrels to the shark, which begin to tire it out because, the barrels are floating up as the shark is trying to get away.
Mm-hmm. So, Dan, wrap this one up for us. How does it end?
So eventually the shark gets pissed and launches a major assault on Quint's boat. It deals major damage to the hull, causing the boat to take on water. Quint attempts to lead the shark back to shallow waters where it would be at a disadvantage, but he burns out the boat's engine and leaves them at the mercy of the shark. Quint is consequently eaten by the shark, but Brody manages to force a pressurized oxygen tank into the shark's mouth. Brody then takes a rifle Quint kept on board and shoots the oxygen tank, exploding the shark's head, which obviously kills it. The movie ends with Brody and Hooper paddling back to shore. The end.
All right.
And then another shark eats them.
If only that would have been a true ending, but no. I think it's a fairly happy ending, aside from Quint dying, I think. But
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
yeah, so let's go ahead and talk through, I guess, the visuals first. And, Nico, start us off with the shark. How does the titular character look?
So the shark looks amazing. It is very, very, very realistic. We never see the full body of it, but you don't really need to. And you can tell that a lot of the budget went into making the actual animatronic for. Did the shark have a name?
It's Jaws, bro.
Jaws.
Just,
I guess. I don't know.
I guess. Yeah. Well, Jaws looks really, really great. It's suitably terrifying and honestly, I would say kind of a precursor to the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. Not quite as impactful, but similar vibes all around.
All right, that's an interesting parallel there. Dan, why don't you talk to me a little bit about kind of the set and the scenery where they are?
About half the movie takes place in the ocean, on the ocean, sometimes underwater too. And it actually looks really good. And I mean, I believe that they were actually in the ocean, filming in the ocean, which I'm sure led to some difficulties.
Just in a bathtub.
If only, no. But it actually, it looks really good. And the underwater shots, actually, I thought look really good. This is a movie that does not look almost 50 years old to me. It looks really good, I think. Like Nico said, the shark looks pretty realistic. I loved it. I just think the visuals, the cinematography was great. I loved it.
And I guess from my perspective, just talking about the color, and I guess color isn't the right word, it's more so light. This film, a lot of horror movies are very dark, but this film is super bright. I mean, it's summertime, and I think the film really gets across a sense of summer very well. Like, you see the people on the beach, it's super bright outside, the only times it's really dark per se are literal scenes at night. Like the scene where Hooper and Brody go find, the wrecked vessel or whatever, that's very dark. It's at night and pretty harrowing as well. Like going into the water at night's fucking terrifying. And also another scene where Hooper, Quint, and Brody are on the boat and they're, comparing battle scars. And we'll talk about that scene too. But it's just, I love the way that this movie didn't make things dark to hide the shark. They came up with other ways to do it, and we'll probably talk about that as well. There's a ton to talk about this movie. But I want to change gears here a little bit. And, audio. Dan, legendary, right?
Of course. You've got John Williams, as writing the score, and it's classic John Williams.
Shout out to the legend.
That's right. And of course, just the theme song, the Jaws theme is one of the most iconic movie themes, movie scores
and it's just
ever.
2 notes.
Yeah. And I don't know, there's not a whole lot to say, I think, aside from just it's really great. That I did find it interesting. There was one part where after they get on the boat and they're kind of hunting down Jaws, and it's sort of like the little montage of them before they start arguing with each other and before a lot of shit starts happening. But it's almost like an adventure soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's not horror. It's almost like, I don't know, Indiana Jones almost or something, which is also sounds very much like John Williams. But it's just interesting to hear that kind of score in a horror film. But it fit what was happening too. But yeah, I think all I have to really say about it is John Williams.
Now, Nico, I'm going to ask you to dive deeper here. And I want you to tell me, how does that main theme, of Jaws, you said it's just 2 notes. How do we achieve a sense of dread or even fear with just those 2 notes?
So this is something that is a masterclass in not only minimalism, but also tension. So the notes, in terms of the sort of music theory of it, they're a semitone apart, just right next to each other. And going from one note back to the other like that is a minor second, which sounds very sort of dissonant, dark, and there's a little bit of a clash there just because the 2 notes aren't very harmonious when juxtaposed against each other, unlike, say, a perfect fifth or something. And given that we have this just very simple, almost not plotting, but menacing almost pace of it, it almost feels like you are in the water with it, and you can just feel the sort of aftershock of the shark swimming through there. It's brilliant, and very many films have tried to replicate it since to limited degrees of success.
I definitely have to agree. And talking from like just a general point, I definitely think that the rest of the audio in the film as well is really good, you know? Like you have those situations where the characters are talking to one another, and even when they're on a boat or near the ocean, they don't get drowned out. I thought it was done really well. Like you can clearly hear everyone all the time. So I was a big, big, big fan of that. Now, another thing that I'm a huge fan of is the film's pacing. So Dan, I kind of want to ask you first. I mean, this film's pacing is excellent, but how did it manage to do that?
I think one of the major ways that it did that is not showing the shark too early. And I think there's a natural progression of viewing or seeing the shark, I think. Because at the very beginning, I think it's the opening scene, we're looking at it, it's like first person from the shark's perspective. And I thought that was interesting, kind of cool. But we kind of go from not ever really seeing the shark, and then a little bit later we see like the shark fin, and then a little bit later we see like it kind of just comes up out of the water and bites at some chum or something. I can't quite remember. So we see like the jaws, the big mouth and everything. But then a little bit later we see more of its body as it swims past the whole boat. We see how big it really is. They commented it's a 25-footer. That's a huge shark. So as the movie progresses, we see more and more and more of the shark. And I thought that was really great because it keeps you wondering at just how monstrous is this shark until they do the full reveal. And then at that point, it's sort of, I don't quite want to say the climax, but now you're like really into it. So I think the reveal of the shark is a major way they worked in the pacing.
Now, Nico, I want to talk to you about a movie that you really like a lot.
Oh, okay.
So when they marketed Alien, right, to the studios, one descriptor they use for it is think of it like Jaws in space. And while the two films are miles apart, both do kind of do something similar in that Alien, you don't really get to see the alien, the titular alien at least, at the start of it. It's revealed a little bit later. So how do you feel, generally speaking, about holding your cards to your chest and not showing the monster straight away? I guess specifically, I said generally, but I mean specifically for this film, how effective is it? And do you think that it's always that effective? Do you think it's something that should always be done, or is it like a play it by ear kind of thing?
I think it is, with the advent of so much technology and advances in filmmaking, it can be sort of a play it by ear thing. But on principle, I think that this is the approach to use in general. A lot of the terror in the second act comes from scenes that we don't even see the shark in at all. Like, in particular, there's a scene when Quint is giving his sort of backstory, and he tells his two companions how he watched as person after person in his sort of unit got just eaten alive by sharks, and no one came to see him. This is during World War II, and it just destroyed him as a human being, and he's forever changed. And because of that, it's really interesting how he takes on the authority and tries to sort of manage the ship and almost take care of everyone else without acting like he's taking care of them. And that gets out a lot of the tension and sort of the gravitas to you without even seeing big ol' Mako there.
And what's also interesting that I just realized after you said that too, is because they put those like yellow barrels on the shark, so we kind of get this progressive, more revealing of the shark as the movie goes on. But then after we've seen the full shark, sometimes when the shark comes back, we don't actually see the shark. We just see the barrels, but we know the shark is there. And because we've seen the shark already, the movie doesn't necessarily have to show the shark anymore, at least not all the time, because seeing the barrels is enough to sort of incite that terror again, especially after a part in that whole scene that you described. You're already kind of on edge, like, holy shit, sharks can do that. Oh my God. And then you see the barrels and you're like, oh God. And they don't even have to show the shark at that point.
Yeah. And Nico, I largely agree with you. The one movie that really sticks out in my mind as kind of defying the rule is John Carpenter's Halloween, with, Michael Myers popping up from the very beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, I do think that you're right, that I do tend to prefer when you don't really get to see the big bad right away. And even when you do get to see him, you don't really get to see everything, like leave something for the climax is what I always say. So I do appreciate that. And I also, there's one scene that's just, to me, it's terrifying. It's when there's two fishermen and they try and catch the shark by like standing on a dock and throwing out like someone's wife's like Christmas ham or something like that. And the shark grabs it, collapses the whole dock. And then the fisherman is so terrified because like a piece of the dock drifts back into the shore and it's assumed that the shark is pulling it and he's coming for the guy. And, the fisherman just barely makes it back to shore, but it was nothing. It was just a drifting piece of the dock that was floating after him. But not only is the character super terrified, but so are you. Because if you didn't fully invest and if you didn't believe that this killer shark was chasing him, you would think it's funny, right? A guy running away from a piece of what is essentially driftwood. But because we have that belief that the shark is there, it's just terrifying. It's honestly crazy terrifying. So that's one of those reasons that it's like, oh man, like that's crazy. But Nico, you also touched on something that I want to cover now, which is the characterization of kind of our three heroes, so to speak. We've got Quint, Hooper, and Brody. So Quint, as you described, Nico, he's a veteran of World War II. He survived the sinking of the USS Indianapolis and the shark attack that happened thereafter.
Which actually is a real thing.
Yes.
I learned.
It's definitely a real thing. So you have that whole side to him. He's very much a believer in the old ways. He doesn't really stand by a lot of Hooper's technology. He scoffs when he sees like Hooper bring like a hypodermic syringe or whatever to try and inject the shark with poison. He's like, what's that gonna do? So there's that. You have Hooper, who is a total nerd, for lack of a better word. He's a shark nerd. And he just loves sharks. And he's a rich boy from the city. And then you've got Brody, who's kind of the everyman. So I want to analyze these characters real quick. I forget the person who put them up like this, but one way that the characters have been analyzed is having Quint be assigned to kind of the old way, or even in some respects, kind of an almost spiritual way. Hooper representing science in the new way, and Brody representing kind of the everyman, an average person. So looking at the characters in that context, why is it that Brody gets the kill? Dan, do you think?
I kind of think he gets the kill because he is the average man. And I think the vast majority of people fit into that category. Of course, yes, you have the people on the far end of one side of the spectrum, people on the other side of the spectrum. But I think, especially in things like politics or whatever, it can be very difficult to remember that there's a huge amount of people that fit in that center area. And I think that just goes for life in general. So I like that you've got these two very polarizing, or not polarizing, but very different characters in Quint and Hooper. But really the average person is the one that kills them.
I think one thing and one point, I guess, so I do see Brody definitely as the everyman, but I also see him as representative of the law. And by law, I'm not necessarily talking about...
He is a cop, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm not even necessarily talking about him in terms of being a police officer, but more so like bringing like justice or balance, so to speak. Because we all know that Jaws is a massive underwater creature, and if we want to, we could read that as almost like a Leviathan-esque creature. And a bringer of like destruction to this island or whatever else. And he almost, in a way, punishes people for sins is a strong word, but I guess almost for their like pride or their ignorance or whatever. Like they know there's a shark there and they still keep going in anyways. At least the mayor did. And so there's that side to it. And Brody's almost kind of like that equal force because he's terrified. He's terrified of the water, but he still goes. He could have easily sent someone else to go, but he chooses to go because it's his responsibility, right? Especially when he sees that it could go after kids, his kid. Like he's all for it. He's like, I cannot have this happen. For like the first like half time they're on the boat, Brody's useless. He can't do anything right. He knocks over the oxygen tanks. I mean, he's so hype when he finally manages to tie a knot for the first time. He's like, hey, I got it. And it's like, all right, I see you. But do you think, and Nico, I'm going to pose this question to you. How'd you like the tension between Quint and Hooper?
I think it drove a lot of the narrative really well, honestly, just because those two characters were so entertaining. They're definitely the more entertaining of the three. Sorry to, good old everyman over here, but it's just more fun to watch people in a horror movie not get along, if you get my drift. Like, if you were watching this and everyone was like, all right, folks, we're gonna meet back here at dawn. Tim, you bring the harpoon gun. Justin, you bring the nets, and I'll bring the chum. All right, and break. Like, that's not a very compelling movie.
So what if I told you, because I know you haven't really looked super deep into like some trivia in this movie. So what if I told you that the actors playing those two characters, so Robert Shaw and Dreyfuss, they had a lot of beef. On set, the two of them would constantly argue, fight. It was well documented and well noted. So do you think that maybe that can help play up the character relation? Because apparently on set, their relationship was very similar to that of Quint and Hooper actually in the movie.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of like breakup sex.
Is it?
Wow.
Is it really?
Or like angry sex.
Wow.
Like, am I wrong?
Wow.
Maybe.
Okay. All right. So, follow me on this journey, y'all.
Okay.
Insert question mark.
You are in a situation where there's someone who you despise, but are just through whatever circumstance you happen to be in the same area of room, boat, whatever with them. And there's clearly some kind of charisma between the two. There's some kind of latent camaraderie that's being like nurtured there, but instead of it growing into something that is happy and maybe complacent, the fact that they are two heads butting, just they kind of fuel each other in a way. Yeah, you're both making that stupid fucking smirk. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Dan, quick question for you now. How do you feel about the fact that Quint's boat is named the Orca, which is like one of the only things in the world that like hunts sharks for real for real? Is that just a cool hint?
I mean, I think it's a cool hint. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a good little Easter egg that I don't think anybody going into the movie is, I mean, people might catch that a little bit, but I don't think it's one of those things that's overly way too much foreshadowing. Like, I don't think people are going to look at the boat and go, oh shit, they're going out to do,
the
whatever.
guy who's a hunter has a boat that's related to hunting.
Right. Like, I didn't get that. Maybe there's a couple people out there who did, but I like after the movie I saw that I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. But like during the movie I didn't really think too much of it. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Now, and this is normally something I'd ask Nico, but I'm going to ask you, Dan, just throw some variety onto the pod.
Oh, okay.
So Moby Dick is an influence on this. It's been stated time and time again, particularly the character of Captain Ahab. Do we see Ahab at all in Quint at any point in the movie?
I think so. Yeah, you've got somebody who is relentlessly pursuing something, which in this case is killing sharks, because Quint is, like we said, survivor of the USS Indianapolis horrific event. And he has just sort of made his life hunting sharks ever since. That's definitely a quality pulled from Captain Ahab, and unfortunately, the shark ends up getting Quint in the end. But it's how it goes. To be like that sometimes.
It sure do.
So, Nico, does Quint deserve to die at the hands of the shark, do you think? I mean, he is the one who doesn't listen to Hooper when Hooper tells him he's burning out the engines. He, is always front and center. Do you think it's deserved what happens to him?
I don't think it's deserved necessarily. I think it's fitting that he meets his end from the shark, though, just because him and the shark are so bound together at this point, almost like cosmically. They're just like hunting each other back and forth in this endless struggle that finally comes to a explosive end. So it's fitting. I wouldn't say he deserved it, though.
I think he almost wants it too.
Well, Dan, I was going to ask you, why does he smash the radio? When Brody calls for, a Mayday SOS, he's like, help, like, our ship is going down. He comes and smashes it up, and he's like, good day to you, Chief. And I'm just like, why did he do that? Does he want to keep this?
Yeah, I think he either wants to die or wants to... He wants to defeat the shark so bad that it's literally victory or death for him. And he puts himself in those situations. And I think that, like, when he's burns out the engine, I think he kind of wanted to. I mean, there's like, he's the captain of a ship. He's been on the water and he knows that ship for decades. So like, he knows what he's doing. He's not accidentally burning out that engine, and there's even smoke coming out. Like he knows.
Yeah.
But he did it anyways. And I think like I said, I think to him, it was the end, whether he wins or the shark wins, it's one or the other.
So now I have another question here, and this is generalized for the pod. One huge part of this movie, particularly at the beginning of it, is this mayor knows that there is something that is dangerous to his people, and it's killing the people on the island. But he tries his hardest to close his eyes and not look at the evidence. He doesn't want to believe it because he could lose money. Now, as any listener right now will know, and to anyone listening in the future, I mean, it's super difficult to not see that through the lens of COVID and the responses that people have had. So I guess just throwing it out there to everyone, really, does this not seem like the same thing except, 50 years ago? I mean, how did you feel about it looking at it through that lens?
Yeah, it's like the mayor is just insert brainless politician here, Governor DeSantis of Florida, Ted Cruz, you name it. Like, the responses are nigh identical.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think prior to COVID, the mayor's response is one that almost seemed fictional or like Hollywood. Like,
yeah, right?
Oh, well, only in Hollywood would the mayor not follow this or not do this or, force the beaches to stay open or whatever. But after this, and I was like, oh yeah, I see that happening in real life. And not only things similar, but like literal beaches staying open. I mean, like quite literally beaches. And it's just funny that, or ironic, I guess, that this is so just the parallels between this movie and what actually is happening and can happen and does happen in real life.
Yeah. I mean, to Nico's point, I remember, or should I say, I won't forget, for spring break in Florida, like they were open. Like they were open for business. It was the same thing. The beaches are open. And that really stuck in my mind when I was watching this movie, just that exact same thing. And to Dan's point, I've seen Jaws, before this, maybe 3-4 times. And I always thought the mayor's response was comic book. Could never happen, really. But looks like it can.
It's almost like a dark comedy now that we have this context in our culture.
Yeah. It is. Kind of is. So I want to change the tone here and talk through some trivia that just happened to find, through the course of researching this. So first is something I want to call trouble with the tides. So Dan talked about it at the start, but this movie was plagued with issues. Predominantly, and one massive reason is they filmed it on the fucking ocean. So apparently the boat sank like 3 times. They would, I think the quote from Spielberg is, on a good day, we would shoot 5 scenes. On a normal day, we'd shoot, I forget how many, like 3 maybe. And on a bad day, we'd get nothing. Because apparently, like high tide, low tide, the currents, the waves, people got seasick constantly. Like it was just not a good look. Nico, does the end product justify all the trouble that they went through to film this on the ocean?
I mean, I think so. This is one of the seminal works of not only horror, but like cinema. So I'm inclined to think so. And this isn't something that is, I think, as egregious as, for example, Stanley Kubrick. The way that he treated Shelley Duvall is something that already, like, saying this out loud, I realize is going to be a hell of a thing to talk about when we eventually do The Shining. But it doesn't seem particularly, I don't know. It doesn't seem that outlandish, upsetting, or bad for the actors. I don't know. Maybe if I read some takes from people who were there, I would change my mind. But I don't think it was that bad.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my perspective on it is it's kind of like a massive chunk of time investment, a massive piece of money investment. I think at the end, all that trouble they went through was worth it, because watching this now, first off, this movie does not look like 1975.
Nope.
Particularly because of all the scenes they did on the ocean. Like, it looks natural. It looks like they're out there, because they are. So, I mean, Dan, I got to get your piece on it as well. Worth it?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that if the movie was filmed in 2021, I think that CG kind of work would be able to accomplish most of that. Now, I am fully and always will be a proponent of, in the audio business, getting it right from the source, meaning if you can be out in the filming on the ocean, I think that's going to be a better end product than doing a green screen or something. But at this point in 2021, we are, I think technology is at a certain point where a green screen ocean looks fucking great.
Yeah.
But back in 1975, I think if they didn't film on the ocean, it would not look as great as it does.
It looks so fucking hokey.
Yeah, it would not hold up today. So I think it was well worth it.
So, and Dan, I mean, as you're going on here, do you have any small pieces of trivia you might have learned?
So one thing I noticed while they were on the ocean, there was this one little like nighttime or a little like time passing montage or something. And there's a shooting star that I noticed.
Yeah, there was 2 of them.
Yeah, and I was like, what the fuck is that about? So I kind of looked into it, and that was just a happy accident. Completely natural shooting star.
Whoa.
And not only that, which I think is kind of cool, but it sort of apparently has turned into sort of a theme for Spielberg movies. And I'm going to have to go back and rewatch some of these and look for these. But I guess Close Encounters, of course, Jaws, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Adventures of Tintin, they all have shooting stars in it. And apparently even Hook and Saving Private Ryan do, supposedly, as well. So it's sort of turned into like a little Easter egg for Spielberg, I guess. But I thought that was kind of interesting.
All right. And kind of one last thing before we get down to business here. Jaws in the book, because it was a book, versus in the movie. So in the book, the shark dies from the extensive wounds that it sustains in the battle with our 3 heroes. I mean, there's a scene where Brody like loads up his pistol and shoots the shit out of the shark. So,
Yeah.
I mean, in the book, the shark eventually kind of succumbs to the wounds, but Spielberg thought that the audience wanted a big thing, a big finale. So they blew the shark the fuck up. Which ending would you like better, I think? Do you go with that big, spectacular ending, or is it a gritty war of attrition for you?
I personally, so I like both depending on the medium and the lens that we're viewing it through. So I agree with Spielberg that I think that sort of a more explosive, literal and figurative explosive end, I think is better in a film context and for the general digestibility of the film. That being said, I also like the metaphors that you can draw from a sort of war of attrition. And we didn't really talk too much about this kind of stuff, but if you're to draw the shark as a symbol of anything, whether it be, capitalism or whatever the fuck you may draw it as, I think more often than not, when that dies or whatever, that is more a war of attrition. Because typically things in life don't just kind of explode like that. It's just going to be a long, drawn out kind of war that eventually one side loses. So I think that poetically and symbolically, the war of attrition is sort of a better way to do it. But I don't think that would translate as well into film.
Mm-hmm. Nico?
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's something fun about blowing a shark the fuck up. And there's just a simple elegance to that, you know?
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. So I do think as well, not to sound like I'm hoity-toity here, but this is a blockbuster type film too, you know? And the audience, the general movie-going, popcorn-eating audience wants to see that explosion. I don't think you're going to get away from that. Also, like the shark just up and dying of, again, I haven't read the book, so I'm sure it just didn't like, and then Jaws died. The end. Like, I'm sure the shark didn't just like run out of time, but that would have been so anticlimactic if they'd fought off the shark and then finally it just slides off into the ocean defeated. Like, no, you got to make sure that shit is dead. So I'm glad they blew it up. And I do think that is the correct ending. So now, real quick, I want to ask everyone here, favorite character, favorite scene. Dan, start with you.
My favorite character is Hooper. I like his humor and I don't know how to say it, flippant attitude sometimes. Like there's a part when you're first introduced to Hooper, all these different shark hunters come in to hunt this killer shark. And there's like this boat of guys, there's like 8 people getting on this boat and they're about to sail away. And Brody's like, no, they're going to, capsize the boat or whatever, it's going to sink. So Hooper, tell them to not do that. So Hooper like yells at them and he's like, hey, Chief says not to do that. And they're like, whatever, fuck you. So as he walks away, Hooper's like, and they're all going to die. Aha, or whatever. And like, I do that kind of stuff all the time. I feel like at work, like that at least that goes on through my head anyways. I'm like, that's not going to work. Okay. Whatever. So I just I really enjoyed his humor and yeah, he's my favorite character. My favorite scene, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to have to go with Quint's monologue about the USS Indianapolis. Yeah. One, because that monologue was just really good, really well done. And especially knowing that's a real event, I think he did a really good job of capturing the horror and the emotion that must have been like going through there. But also kind of what I mentioned before of even after that, like you're still on edge on your seat, and just like, when is this shark going to come back? And again, I think they just show like the barrels coming back up or something. I don't even think you see Jaws itself, but that because of that monologue, that inspires fear in you just by seeing these yellow barrels that otherwise would be harmless.
Yeah. And, for those of our listeners who don't know about the USS Indianapolis, so it basically was on a top secret mission to deliver parts of Little Boy, which was a nuclear bomb that we ended up using. And so they did it, they completed their mission and they were then sunk by a Japanese submarine. And what happened was there were 1,195 crewmen aboard. About 300 of them went down with the ship. But the remaining 890 crew members that survived that initial experience, they then faced, like exposure to the elements, dehydration, saltwater poisoning, and shark attacks. And of the 890, only 316 survived. So that was absolute nuts. And it's the greatest like single loss of life at sea from one ship in the history of the U.S. Navy. So that was like one of the worst things that could have happened. And Robert Shaw did that scene spectacularly. If I remember correctly, he like did it and then he ended up like asking to redo it again. is what I heard, or like they ended up redoing it again. And the second time around, it was so powerful. Like that's the one they kept because that's just honestly fucking terrifying. And like I've jokingly discussed this with some of my friends and family when like flying to Trinidad, because obviously you fly over the ocean. And the joke is like, you know, don't give me a life jacket. Like if we hit the ocean, do not give me a life jacket so a shark can eat me. Because that's like the running joke. But like in the movie, he actually says like, there'll be no more life jackets for me. And that shit is true, bro. He actually doesn't do it. But Nico, favorite character, favorite scene?
My favorite character is Quint just because he absolutely oozes charisma. I love every scene that he's in, and he really just stole the show for me. My favorite scene, though, is when they get the tiger shark the first time, and everyone is all happy-go-lucky, and they're like, yeah, we did it, woo, yay. And just because it has massive George Bush mission accomplished vibes, and that in context with the way that we are currently handling COVID and all that, it was a little cathartic to see these motherfuckers just get everything so wrong.
So my favorite character is also Quint. I think that he is the kind of character that is not really written anymore. Like, or should I say, the character is written but never portrayed so well. Like, it's excellent. It was weird. I watched an interview with him, and he's like, he speaks naturally with like, you know, like a kind of British-ish accent. Maybe it's Irish. I'm not 100% sure, but it's like one of those accents, and it's like, bro, like, that's how you speak naturally, but then like you're talking like a grizzled old seafarer in this one. So I thought that was really cool. Also, my man came with the cutlass. He had the cutlass on deck.
He did, yeah.
It was literally on deck. And when the shark was biting him, I don't know if y'all saw, but he was like hacking him with the cutlass still. Like he was still fighting with the cutlass when a shark's like biting his body in half, basically.
He survived longer than I thought he would.
Yeah, straight up.
He's just amazing. And my favorite scene in this movie, I thought about it. First off, it's definitely that scene when they're all on the boat. They're like comparing their wounds. It culminates in that scene Dan talked about with the monologue about the USS Indianapolis. But I like it when Hooper, you know, so they're comparing all these wounds they got from like sharks. And it's like, oh, like this one ripped me arm. Oh, this one cut me in my leg. And then Hooper like bares his chest and points and he goes, this one, the worst I ever got. And they're like, we don't see anything. And he's like, Mary something. She broke my heart. And I was like, Trixie boy. I like that one, though. So that was mine. But it's time for the what would you do? So first, we're going to determine who amongst our group is Brody. See, I feel like it's Dan. Dan is that guy. Dan.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right. So who's going to be Hooper and Quint? Am I Quint, Nico?
Yeah.
Are you
you're
Quint? I'm
yeah.
Quint. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
So Dan is Brody. I'm Quint. You're Hooper, Nico, and this makes sense because you're trying to kill me still. So everything kind of goes now. Dan, do you think you would really fight the mayor when the mayor's talking to you about like, there's no sharks here, shut up?
Yeah, I definitely would. I would offer up a fight, and man, I don't know. See, I want to say that I would do pretty much what Brody did, offer up a fight, and then at a certain point just be like, all right, well, you're the boss, so I can only do what you want. But I don't know, that's tough, man, because if I am convinced that there's a shark there, that's people's lives at stake, man. You know, I can't. I would give up. I would give up eventually. I would heed to the mayor.
And Nico, since you're Hooper, so you get called to the island and you examine the tiger shark and you know that that's not the killer. You find the great white shark tooth and the mayor's still like, nah, we good. Do you do anything different from what Hooper did, or do you just give up and leave? Like, do you stay and fight?
I
or
would
do you
probably
just leave?
get like a lot more aggressive and angry because I have a problem with not shutting the fuck up when there's someone who is troubling me with their idiocy. And this motherfucker just doesn't get the evidence. I cannot fathom how someone, well, yes, I can now that we are where we are. I would just get up in his face.
All right. So the three of us, you know, we get on a boat and we head out, to try and like kill the shark. So first off, when the engines start to go, and the engines do start to go, can you think of any plan outside of getting into that cage, that steel cage? Or is that, do you think, the best idea they had? Or do you think they should have tried something different?
I would have just waited, load up my guns and waited. And then if there was an opportune moment, I would shoot the shit out of that shark.
Yeah. Just come absolutely strapped.
See, that's what I was thinking too, because at a certain point in time, Jaws breaches and he comes up on the boat. But I have a feeling that if Hooper had been on the boat, they might have been able to save Quint. Because remember, Brody's no good on a boat.
Yeah.
He sucks. But Hooper's not. Hooper's actually pretty useful. So I'm thinking Hooper might have been able to. And the funny thing is, Hooper goes into the water to try and poke the shark with a stick. But then right after, a prime opportunity happens to poke the
just
shark.
poke him, nothing else.
Yeah, well, okay, he wants to poke him with like a poison that'll kill it.
Yeah.
But like after he goes in the water and completely fails and he goes and hides and doesn't contribute anything for the rest of the movie, like he literally could have just stayed on the boat and poked the shark eventually, because the shark was going around him. Like there were opportunities to penetrate its hide.
Well, no, he wasn't trying to poke it. He was trying to get it in its mouth.
Yeah.
Well, dude, the shark's mouth was like right there.
Right. Well, yeah,
What-
yeah, for sure. Which, I mean, it is ironic that like the shark jumps up on the boat and then it's just chilling there with its mouth open. Like, hey, you could have just, done it right then. But
Toss it in there.
yeah.
Yeah. But I think you're right, Dan. I think I would have kind of not been so hasty, and I would have tried to like, just load up, because the shark, I mean, yeah, he was starting to sink the boat, but I feel like they could have.
They should have brought more dynamite. There was a motherfucker that had dynamite earlier in the movie.
Oh, true.
So that's what I was gonna say. Is there anything not within the movie different that you would have done? And the dynamite's a key thing. They would have blown the fuck out of that shark when he was passing right by the boat.
Yup.
Or Quint could have like dove into his mouth with a stick of dynamite or something, bro.
Here's what I
Really?
would have done that is like very 2021. So there have been multiple studies that have come out that show that death metal produces the same sort of vibrations and frequency response as schools of fish when they're freaked out and in danger, which attracts sharks. So I would just blare some fucking Opeth down into the deep blue sea and wait for that chumly looking motherfucker to come and just blow his ass up.
Did you say
Wow.
Chun-Li looking motherfucker?
Chumli.
Oh.
Yes, this Chun-Li tornado kick looking whatever. Chun-Li's the shark, guys. It's Chun-Li.
That's the
Okay.
shark's name.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the critics score. And oh boy, I believe this is tied for the highest rated movie we've ever reviewed on the pod.
With what, Alien?
Yes, with Alien. So Jaws is sitting at a 98% from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an audience score not too far behind of 90. So I want to know, we've talked about the movie, we talked about all the things we enjoy and all the things we like. I want to get your score. If you have any criticisms of the movie, let's start with you, Nico.
So I was very pleasantly surprised with this movie. It is something that is, I think, a little bit timeless with how much it was, one, ahead of its time, and B, just still really holds up well. Having said that, I don't know. This is a movie that I find myself wanting to like more and more, but it just doesn't capture me the same way that some of the others do. I'm still going to give it a high score, don't worry, but I'm going to give it like an 89. An 89.
Okay.
Okay. Dan, how about you?
So I loved this movie. I really, really think that this movie is a masterclass in filmmaking. And it's what happens when you have people who are really fucking good at what they do get together and make a film. And to Nico's point, I think that helps make it timeless. There's no like tricks involved and, oh, let's try to make this bigger than it is or cooler than it is or whatever. They don't rely on a whole bunch of bad stuff to get around what they were trying to do. They like the cinematography and everything was just amazing. And I just really, really liked it. And I wasn't really expecting to be scared from it or anything like that. And I kind of really wasn't, but there's still definitely a lot of tension in it. And the whole premise of being on the water and being attacked by a shark doesn't really scare me. Like, I mean, in real life, sure, but in a movie, not so much. But it still effectively was, terrifying and definitely had that tension. So I really, really love this movie. I'm gonna agree with the critics and a 98 for me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's gonna get a 96 from me. I think that this is one of the best movies that I've seen. I agree with everything Dan said. It is a masterclass. Not only is it a masterclass, but it is a kind of like a once in a lifetime type moment where you get the exact situation to get the movie you get, like the situation going on between Robert Shaw and Dreyfus, to get that tension that also carries over to the characters. The fact that the ocean and the sea made them constantly do reshoots, but at the same time, that probably led to them getting the shots they needed, like, because think about it, if they didn't have to do constant reshoots, who would have known if they had gotten that shooting star if they didn't have to always do that? Everything was perfect. I can't think of anything. I mean, I normally am the first one to say, hey, they probably could have left stuff out to get the plot down. No, like from the start to the end, this is amazing. I fucking love it. 96. Recommendation? Yes, obviously. I'm assuming everyone recommends it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nods of approval around the table for listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And golden seal of approval, I'm going to say yes. That was, I did a bite.
Wow.
I did a bite there.
Wow.
Jesus.
I'm also gonna bite and say yes.
I'm also going to say yes, just because I rated it lower than y'all, but I recognize that this is like some cream of the crop shit.
All right. Stamped. Golden seal of approval. Oof. First one in a minute, huh?
Yeah.
First one in a minute. Yeah, guys.
Mhm.
All right. Well, any last words before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, sharks are really fucking cute and largely misunderstood. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, watch this movie.
Except for great whites.
Except for great whites.
I'm going to say, they say that sharks only attack like 10 people a year or some shit like that.
Yeah.
That fact is not going to make you feel any better if you're one of the 10. So
True.
as someone who's had my run-ins with shark, singular, so I'll leave that alone. I've got a healthy respect of things in the ocean. I stay out of their way. They stay out of my way. So yeah, listeners, if you've agreed with everything we said or anything we said, disagree, want to drop us a line, you can find us on Facebook. We're Don't Open That Door. We're on Twitter and Instagram at DOTD Horror. And introducing our brand new website, it's dotdhorror.com. Again, that's dotdhorror.com. You can find all our episodes there, pictures of our beautiful faces, and a really thought-provoking quote from Nietzsche. So, yeah, take care of yourselves. Be careful when you step into the deep. And as always, dear listener, don't open that door. Bye.